time. He is also the first president in American history to have the ignominious distinction of having been impeached twice. And we'll see what happens with impeachment and or conviction. We've never actually had a president of the United States convicted. We've had others impeached, but not convicted. When we first planned this, Tony and us here in the group, we thought, well, we'll have Ann speak about the first 100 days of the Biden administration and the Senate Georgia races, which I think have really gotten lost in the shuffle. And but we did not foresee an insurrection at the Capitol. Sorry. We'll have to get out our crystal ball a little better next time. Ann has been one of our most frequent guests here in the Villages, which we greatly appreciate, given the depth of her political experience, both nationally and locally. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ann. I may interject myself occasionally to follow up with interview questions, and we'll go from here. Welcome, Ann. Thanks so much for coming again.
Thank you so much, Bob and Tony, and thanks for the introduction. So, yes, I was asked to substitute for Adam Schiff, but I don't think I talked about the same things that he was going to talk about, probably, nor do I have that immediate experience that he had of being there in the Capitol when it was under siege. Really, what I was talking about was the issue of truth, the issue of responsibility of our elected officials. And one of the things I'd like to talk about today, in addition to any questions that anybody else has, is about how we're going to go forward, how the administration is going to go forward, given what we now know, but we always knew about a certain large subset of our country that is not just divided, but is also intent on undermining democracy. And how is that going to impact as we go forward? Because I think that's a really important issue. So I don't know whether Tony and Bob, if you want to have me drone on, or do you want to set up a situation where we can just talk together about these issues?
Go ahead.
Bob, what I suggest we do is, because people seem to be a little bit uncomfortable about raising their hands, we invite Diane to spend a couple of minutes explaining how this can work and how we can make it a more intimate discussion than just having you lecture to us. So let's bring Diane up and spotlight her and tell us a little bit about it, please, Diane.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation. We're going to offer you a couple of ways to communicate your questions to Ann and get answers. One is a way that I think most of you are familiar with, where you can look at your Zoom screen, move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, and there's a QA function. You can enter a question there by typing in your question, and I will read those questions to Ann and to Bob, and we'll get the responses. Another way is if you will use the raise your hand feature that's available under participants. You click on participants and gives you an opportunity to raise your hand. And that will allow us to open up your video so that we could see your face, and we'll turn on your audio, or you will actually turn on your audio, and we will do a chat one-on-one. Now, one of the things I'm requesting is a little bit of etiquette, because we're going to be opening this up and everybody has an opportunity to speak. Here are a few, I'll call them suggestions, that we ask of people who are going to be with their microphones open. One is mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Minimize distractions. Avoid eating while you are visible. Turn off or silence your cell phone and your home phone so that we don't have the sound of a phone ringing in the background. Be careful to not interrupt people, and especially enjoy today's discussion. So at this point, there are a couple of questions that have been submitted. The first one is, my question is, does that mean that when a Democratic majority, including Harris, that Trump is surefire to be convicted?
Well, you know, Kamala Harris is still in the Senate until the 20th, because she has, you know, until the 20th, the new administration does not take office. So if the impeachment hearing itself is on, and the vote is on the 19th, she casts a vote, but that does not make her a tiebreaker.
Thank you.
Isn't it necessary for a conviction though that it's a 2/3, not a simple majority?
It is. It is. And that's, you know, that's going to be a really big issue as well.
Next question. My question is, does that mean that, oh no, that was just the one I just asked. So we're looking for additional questions. So our audience members must have a few things on your mind.
Cool.
Take advantage of the Q&A feature or raise your hand and we'll have you join the conversation.
Well, I have a question while we're waiting for more questions. And this is really unique territory in the sense that it looks like the impeachment trial in the Senate is going to take place after Biden becomes president. First of all, as someone who prides himself on knowledge of American history, I didn't even know we could impeach a president beyond their term. So that's a bit unusual.
Right.
And the second thing is, what are the political dynamics of Biden being inaugurated and wanting to get other things done, as in COVID and other higher priorities of the impeachment trial, drowning out what he's trying to do? And so what do you think the likely trial date would be, and what are some of the political dynamics you can address that we could become more knowledgeable about?
Yeah, well, I just recently heard that about the president being able to be impeached, even though he, in this case, is not still sitting as the president, which seems unusual.
Yes.
And we also have to remember that subsequent to that, which is something that I think that the Congress will want to do, is they have to have another vote to assure that he cannot hold office ever again. And I think that that's something else that they're going to want to have to do and set for a vote both in the House and the Senate. So that's a little bit of a delay. And we know, at least from news reports, that Biden, who has made the desire to reach across the aisle and to try to unify the country, doesn't really want to emphasize the impeachment. And with good reason. I mean, I think he realizes that there are some really major issues like COVID that he wants to remedy, and wants the attention of the country to be looking at that and trying to find ways to get the vaccines distributed better and change that dynamic, as well as, you know, I think that though, and he said it in his speech, which I thought was a really effective speech, the day that the Capitol building was being unceremoniously entered, that one of the things that he wanted to emphasize and to focus on is making changes that will remedy our democracy. And so I think in order to do that, in order to make that change, he needs to focus on, you know, what are the potential ways that either by executive order or for other reasons that you know, executive orders, and, you know, we were going to talk about this before, but they can be overturned by the Senate and by the Congress in general. So I think for that reason, he also wants to kind of re-solidify a certain amount of unity and take advantage of the Republicans who are offended by the problem and by what happened, even if they haven't voted for impeachment. many of them have expressed concerns about what happened during the Trump administration, especially more recently. And so I think he wants to take advantage of that time to
Right.
be able to get himself in a position where he can start moving forward.
Yeah. So how far out could the trial be pushed? What do you think Nancy Pelosi will do in terms of when she'll ask the Senate to act? What's the likely scenario?
Yeah, my guess is that they're going to want to get this done quickly, because I think she probably understands that dynamic. And, undoubtedly, and I don't have any insider insight on this, but I would assume that they're wanting to kind of be done with Trump in all of his incarnations, including the accountability. I mean, because everybody does want accountability for the things that were done that were clearly incitement, in not only before the Capitol incursion, but and more is coming out about that, but in terms of what he's done throughout his presidency. And so I would guess that in order to make a better transition, they're not going to want to dwell on these things and just want to get it done.
Mm-hmm. How much, Ann, do you think, how much do you think there could be a potential carrot here for the Republicans in voting for conviction, in the sense that if they pass the basically enforcement of the 14th Amendment, Section 5, I think it is, implementing the 14th Amendment against insurrection, which takes us back to the Civil War, by the way. If they do that, it would ban him from ever holding office. Right. So I'm wondering if this could actually be a carrot for the Republicans that have presidential ambitions themselves and would be competing for Trump for future presidential competition, if that could actually be something the Republicans might look upon favorably.
Well, given what we know about politicians and about people who are wanting to advance their careers, and seeing what we've already seen with how a number of the Republicans in the Congress and in the Senate have been willing to do things that really aren't in the best interest of democracy, but more in the best interest of their own careers, I wouldn't be surprised that there will be some who will see that as an opportunity for them.
Bob?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think Howie might have a question. Howie,
okay.
You've got your hand raised.
I don't have a question as much as if I can make a comment with regards to the question was asked as Kamala Harris, will she be the deciding vote if there's a tiebreaker to convict Trump? I heard this on MSNBC about a week ago, and basically it's 2/3 majority of those that are voting. So it's not 2/3 majority of the 100, it's 2/3 the majority of those present to vote. And so the possibility that was laid out, it's possible not all of the Republicans would show up to vote, so they would, so therefore they don't have to vote for or against him if they wanted him to be convicted. So, it'd be interesting to see. I think it's the 19th that it can go to Senate the day before inauguration, but it's an interesting concept to hear that. Secondly, after that vote, what I heard on MSNBC is assuming that there would be the 2/3 majority of those present to vote to convict them, they could then have some amendment or some bill passed or whatever you want to call it that says he can't run for any public office again.
Right. Yeah, I think there's another vote. There could be another vote on that.
There are a couple of questions in our Q&A box. Are you ready for questions, Ann?
Sure.
I sometimes turn to Fox News to see what is their perspective. And what I find is that they are operating in a different universe. They continue to stoke conspiracy theories and derail the conversation away from their culpabilities. How does the country get Fox News to pay for their part in the insurgency by enabling the Trump conspirators? Next, she says, or he, the ex-PM of Australia has been talking about the Murdoch empire to be brought to pay. Is that a possibility in the US?
Well, let me first start with saying that the questioner is right, that most of the false information and the deception and misinformation that is passed to the internet and then spread to millions of people that caused a lot of these small groups to engage in violence. That first comes from, and people think that it's just originates on the internet, but it doesn't. It starts with Fox News. It started with Trump, and it also started with a number of the regular newspapers that are the right-wing newspapers that have promulgated all of these conspiracy theories and vitriol and hatred. And so you're right about Fox News having responsibility for it, but I think that under the First Amendment, it is their right to, as a news media, to say what they want to say. And there isn't a requirement for truth. What is a requirement, though, and what can be dealt with, is if some of the things that they have spread are spread and are said in a way that they themselves incite to violence. And I think those are things that could be dealt with. Whether that is going to happen is not very likely, but it could be, because the First Amendment has exceptions, and those exceptions include inciting to violence and direct voter suppression and other acts of hate that cause injury to people.
Okay, next question. We know that with VP Harris, Senate Majority Chuck Schumer, Dems will set the agenda. Please explain what level of votes are needed to support any legislatures. Is it simple majority or 60 votes? What do you see with Biden's agenda getting passed with a 50-50 Senate?
Yeah, well, most of the bills that come before, I mean, the impeachment vote is unusual, but most of the bills, most of the legislation that comes before the Senate is a majority. It's not a 2/3, it's a simple majority. And that is why having Kamala Harris as the person who can now be the tiebreaker is really important, because she can add her vote in many instances that will make a difference. Of course, if there's other mechanisms that are being used that to prevent things from coming to a vote and the like, that would be a problem, and she can't impact that.
And is it just 60 votes that are needed when you pass financial bills? Is that when the 60 votes are required?
I think that's right. I think that when it includes, and this is definitely not my expertise, because I'm not, I'm not a legislator, but
Right.
I think that's,
That was kind of my impression. It was 60
yes,
votes for
I think it is. I think that's right. But don't hold me to it.
Can I throw in a quick one? And Lisa Murkowski is claiming, or has said, she's going to leave the Republican Party. If she stays as a senator, where does that leave her and the Senate majority? Do you think?
Well, if she leaves the Republican Party and is just an independent, I'm not sure that that's going to make much of a difference in terms of the majority. It might, on certain things, but not on others.
Does an independent have to declare, like, I know the two that we have on the Democratic Party, they say they caucus with the Democrats.
Mhm.
So is it possible being independent and not caucus, or don't they usually they pick a side, right? Usually.
Yeah, I would guess that on most matters, that if she is so disgusted with the Republican Party that she wants to leave, that the likelihood is she'll be caucusing with the Democrats. But it well may be, given her situation representing the state and the constituents, that on certain things that she might not go along with them. I mean, it's hard to know. Maybe she's not becoming a Democrat wholeheartedly because that's probably more palatable to her
Yeah.
state. I don't know. I presume that's the case.
Back to Diane. You have
Next
any more
question.
questions?
Yes, we've got several more. If Trump is convicted in the Senate, could he appeal to the Supreme Court or otherwise resort to litigation to delay or mitigate the effect, such as lifetime ban, losing ex-president's privileges, etc.?
Well, he's always tried to resort to the courts, and he might want to appeal to the court with some, so to speak, trumped up rationale.
Trumped up. Like
Yes, right, right. Rationale, but I think that unless there is some irregularity in the vote, where the vote was not following what the rules and regulations of the Senate are, I think it's going to be a very difficult road for him to go down. Because, I mean, even this Supreme Court, which is a number of people who were appointed by Trump, refused to take some of those cases that claimed that the election was a fraud in certain states. And so, I think there's a precedent to them not just following in lockstep. And frankly, I think that the Supreme Court now, while many of them are very conservative, that Trump has kind of lost his luster, I would say. And so I don't think people, especially if he is impeached and if there's a vote to deny him the ability to run again, I think that's kind of gives more freedom to the Supreme Court.
Okay, we've got Tom Stoiber. You have a question or a comment, Tom?
Yes, I do. I've been reading a number of the articles written about the situation, and it seems to me that we have the underpinning of a coup going on. If you look at the 3 congressmen who are supposed to be allegedly gave the bad people a tour of the Capitol so they would know where Nancy Pelosi was. Right. Secondly, there's 140 cases going on right now by the FBI investigating this. And it looks to me that we've just got pre-planned sedition, meaning to say this is something that could go on for a long time and involve presidents and senators and big people like that. So to Ann, I was just wondering, do you think this is over-exaggerated on my part, or do you see it going in that direction?
No, I think you're right. I mean, the information that has been trickling out, and you've discussed it since the Capitol attack, is outrageous. The sort of connection with some of the members of Congress and bringing them in, giving tours for the people who were going to come and attack, as well as the connections with some of the law enforcement that was meant to Capitol Police and who were meant to protect the Capitol building and did not, because they were in cahoots with the I don't know what we call them. We know we don't call them demonstrators, but anyway, I mean, I think you're right about that. I think that this issue and the investigation of it is going to be a significant issue for some time coming, even during the beginning of the administration. And so it's interesting, though. I mean, you see a lot of press that says, well, all of that is going to just divide the nation more, which, yes, maybe it is, but holding people accountable for those actions is more important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing is it's likely that a number of these people are of the Republican Party. And if you have senators who don't vote for the good of the country, then you can see that undermining the Republican Party. So you could have a coup going on and parallel the destruction of the Republican Party.
Right.
Pretty serious stuff.
And yeah, that is, and that can happen. And I'm certain that the Republicans are really nervous, which is why if you look at, even though he's never going to stand up for doing what's right, but Mitch McConnell is, becoming much more, shall we say, modulated.
You're very good with words.
Yes. But, because I've had, being at the Federal Election Commission, a lot of personal understanding and not interactions, but I saw a lot of how Mitch McConnell operates. And, he's certainly a person whose interest, it has to do with power. And I think he's recognizing that their power is now diminishing a lot.
Thank you very much for your answer.
I've got another question, Anne. Absent early removal from office, is there any way to prevent Trump from pardoning all named January 6 domestic terrorists?
I think Trump has, if he does this within the time period, I think that he has that right to do that, to pardon whoever he wants. I mean, look, he's going to pardon himself. He's pardoning his family. He's pardoning other people that are domestic terrorists. I mean, he's clearly pardoned those people that admitted to criminal acts. So I once again, this is not my expertise, but I don't think that these are appreciably any different.
Thank you. Next question. Has there been any thoughts on changing the location of the inauguration for the safety of the Biden and Harris and other dignitaries?
I don't think that they're going to do that, although it's going to be a much smaller inauguration anyway. And I know that they have really stepped up the security for it. And we can't forget, I know this is not the question, but we can't forget that there's also been threats of state capitals. And a lot of these people who were at the Capitol were from all over the country. They are, I live in, can you hear me?
So Howie, your volume is on, if you would mute. Thank you.
I live in Los Gatos, and there was, which is, talk about a bedroom sleepy community. And there were violent clashes with some of these same people who were demonstrating about the steal and saying that there was civil war and civil war was going to come, and throwing bottles at people who disagreed and calling them, anti-Asian epithets. I mean,
Wow.
I just think this is something that is going to be a problem throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a just curious question. Most or all of the House managers for the second impeachment are different than the first. Do you know Pelosi's thinking behind this? I would have thought that experience would be very helpful.
I don't know the thinking of it, but she has done a good job of trying to find people who have constitutional knowledge of constitutional law, who are really good orators, and maybe she wants to spread the work to different people. So it does not look like there's just one small group of people who have it in. I mean, because we know that a lot of the people who have been outspoken in the previous votes and the previous hearings on impeachment have gotten threats. I mean, and so it may be just, and of course I'm making this up, but it may be that she just wants to show that there's sort of unity of purpose with a lot of the people in the Senate and the House.
I see. Next question. Campaign finance reform. What is your best case expectation on what can happen on this topic during the Biden presidency?
Well, I know that right away, the HR 1, which is called the For the People Act, and those of you who haven't read it, it was written by John Sarbanes. It's incredible because it is a very broad-based democracy reform that passed in the House in 2017, I believe, or later maybe, and has never passed the Senate, but is going to be brought up again and hopefully will pass the Senate. And it has campaign finance reform in it, both the requirements to have small donor financing on the federal level, changing the way that the FEC, which is totally dysfunctional and will continue to be that way, but changing their composition so it won't be dysfunctional, and also to look at more disclosure on the internet, which is now, we know, one of the ways, at least through money comes to some of these organizations and gets funneled on the internet secretly. And so no one really knows. And then they're also asking, there's a provision in it that asks for reform of corporate giving as well. And so it would require that corporations have a vote of their shareholders in order to give money into campaigns, which would do two things. It would surface the fact of the giving to the public, and it would also, require a 51% vote of shareholders who might think that giving money to some of these evildoers isn't in the best interest of their share prices. So.
Very good. Next question. I know the impeachment and actions last week have taken over our thoughts, but can you share anything about the Biden administration's first moves and important focus?
Yes, well, we know, for example, that they are focused on COVID and COVID relief. And it's clear that Biden has said, and he's appointed some amazing people to carry out his COVID program. And he has essentially said that providing vaccines and having a much more robust program and trying to encourage people to get vaccinated by better public health sort of advisories and discussions about the vaccines, I think is going to be a big priority for him. He's also said that he's going to have prioritization of climate change issues. And that one of his first acts, day one, is going to be to rejoin the Paris Accord. But it's clear, because he's set up a really important group, that he's going to be working on climate issues as well. And he also, I mean, it's interesting because you can see who he's appointed to some of the higher level positions. And he, of course, has appointed the nominee that Obama had to the Supreme Court, who they refused to nominate to be the at the head of DOJ. And then he's also appointed some higher level people in DOJ, mostly to the Civil Rights Division. And so it's clear too that he wants to work on equity throughout the country. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it that that is going to be a major aspect of what he's going to do right at the beginning. But he also said, and I think I mentioned this, I mean, he wants to deal with democracy issues as well. And so we know, just given what we've seen, there's a whole panoply of democracy issues, whether it be voting rights, ethics issues, issues of campaign finance, as well as just generally civic engagement and how to get people more engaged in government issues and in you know, electoral processes. But also, I think he's just wanting to deal with the problems that we now see with the lack of media, the fact that there is no truth anymore, and you know, that it's all spread on internet platforms. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement in that as well.
Wow.
Citizens United might be part of that, Anne?
You know, I think that that's it would be nice, but it's a dream because it's a Supreme Court decision. And the Supreme Court, if anything, now has Gorsuch and others on it. That so there's an even bigger number of people who are not going to alter that decision. So it's not, there's not an ability to for the executive branch or even the legislative branch to alter that decision, unfortunately.
Thank you. This next question says, with all the stars aligned, the Senate, House, and presidency controlled by the Dems, Biden has a rare 2 years before the next elections to drive his agenda. What do you think are the top 5 things he will try to achieve for the next 2 years?
Well, I think some of what we talked about that he wants to prioritize right at the beginning, I think he will. I think there's also, importantly, the issue of the economy, especially given COVID and what has happened throughout the country. And my assumption is, and I'm pretty sure that this will happen, is because he also quickly appointed Buttigieg to the head of the Department of Transportation, that he's going to want to do a lot of work on projects throughout the country that will employ people and will also help our infrastructure. So that's, I think, going to be a big priority for him.
I think those are good items. Next question. Any suggested talking points for friends and family who still feel that the election was stolen?
Well, you know, I think that if people read the court decisions, by actually, they were almost all people, judges who were appointed by Trump, who looked at those arguments that the election was stolen in Pennsylvania and in Arizona and in Georgia and in all these different places. I mean, in particular, the judge in Pennsylvania, who was Republican, appointed by Trump, and he was so scornful of the arguments that were being made. And I think it's important for people to realize judges, at least supposedly, and I think this is a good example of this, they are there to look at the facts, look at what's presented, and make unbiased decisions based on the law. And that's what they did in these cases. And the Supreme Court, which also contained a majority or a large number of Trump appointees and former Republican appointees, refused to take the case. That in and of itself is a really telling fact, because, you know, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe, you know, even the election officials if you don't want to, although you should, because they too are public servants who are just trying to do the right thing. And a lot of them were Republicans. So I think, though, the fact that the courts were so unified in this, in at least 10 cases, should be enough for people to say, you know, there's a question here. And the problem that we have been facing, I think, in our country, and this is, you know, this is just me, you know, ranting, and not exactly a response to your question, but because of the way that the media has changed, where people, Fox News or even MSNBC, everybody has an opinion. And it's so the facts are wound up with people's opinions. And I think people have lost the ability to actually think through facts and give credence to facts anymore. And I don't like to talk about, you know, post fact, but I do think that it's partly sort of the media environment that we're now in, which is really unfortunate. Plus the fact that people don't understand government. They just don't. They don't know how government works. And that's, you know, the fault of lack of civic education, unfortunately. But you know, so that's my high horse and rant for the day. But you know,
It's an excellent one.
Can I give you one more, Anna?
Mhm.
If Joe Biden came to you and said, how can I maximize the chances of 2022 working out favorably for me? What do you think he should be concentrating on, and how do you think he might actually improve rather than reduce his position?
Right. Well, I think one of the things that really needs to be done, and what has also, I mean, we have to admit that what has caused, and this is no justification for these crazy people who are breaking windows in, you know, the temple of democracy, and you know, injuring people and the vile things that were done. But you know, there are a lot of people in this country who feel they don't have a voice, who don't feel like they're part of the community, and they feel like they've lost something. I mean, the reason, I know a lot of people, the concern is, of course, that these people are racists, and they are, but one of the reasons that they are, and misogynist, I think, is they feel like they've lost something. And I think government has an obligation, and I feel strongly about this too. You know, if you look at what happened in the Senate and in the House, a lot of these people were continuing to promulgate these falsehoods. I mean, those are things we need more. We need government to be respected, transparent, to do what Franklin Roosevelt tried to do after, the Depression, and to try to bring people together, to try to do things that were social welfare and help people to get ahead and not feel like they're being excluded. But also, to try to get back to truthfulness. And, I've been very, since I'm obsessed with all of this, as you all sound like you are too, but I've been spending some time I'm not really a historian, but I was reading about Margaret Chase Smith in 1950, who stood up, and there were very few women she was a senator, very few women, and she's a Republican, and she stood up and criticized her party and criticized the other party for spreading lies and saying, we need to have, and she called it, I think, the four horsemen of the
Apocalypse.
Yes,
Apocalypse, yeah.
exactly. And it was, she really talked about integrity and truth, and that's what we need. Everybody needs to be electing people who are going to have integrity, who are going to speak the truth and not stop and pay more attention to those things and hold elected officials accountable to doing this for our country. Because we do have to, as odious as what we saw and the people we saw, honestly, there's a whole bunch of people out there that feel disaffected. We've got to bring them together. And I think that's something that Biden has to do.
Thank you. Dwayne, I think you have a comment or a question.
Howie had his hand up first. He's had his hand up for quite a while. Howie.
Who's on?
Let Dwayne go.
Okay, thanks, Howie. I'm wondering how much contention you think there's going to be with the most progressives, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders, AOCs, and so forth. So on. I wonder how much contention you think there's going to be between them and the agenda that Biden's going to try to push.
Yeah. I worry about that, and maybe not so much Elizabeth Warren, who has actually been in the executive branch, so I think she has strong feelings, but I think she has a better grounding in how government works and how you have to, work with others to operate. I do worry though, because I have heard lots of people coming because of the AOCs and potentially the Bernie Sanders people who just are, for example, they're objecting to some of those people who have been nominated by Biden. And the one of them who runs the Center for American Progress, Mira Tandon, I happen to know her. She is a woman who, and they're objecting to her because for the Center for American Progress, sorry about the light coming in. I'll see if I can move a little bit, but
so that's better.
That's better. I know it's kind of, I have a skylight that I guess it's sunny out there. She got money to support her organization from corporations. And because of that, it was all disclosed. It's to do work that is amazingly good. She's really progressive. She cares about democracy. She's someone who was raised with a single mother and no money. And for them to say, oh, you can't have her in that position. It's ridiculous. It's so crazy and extreme and unfair. So I do think it's going to be really a problem, but let's hope maybe they too, like the Republicans, will be tempered by the fear of the extremes. Let's hope.
Right.
Thank you, Dwayne. Howie, you have a question or a comment?
If I can go back to some questions that were asked and answered, the question about moving the inauguration, I think if that were to be done, it gives a victory to the insurgents. You know, our heritage is that we always have an inauguration there, and we have to show that it didn't sway that from happening. In terms of the talking points of the election being stolen, and I don't know how many Republican Secretary of States there were that said, hey, the vote was accurate and fair. Point to that. If Trump is saying it's so widely stolen, why wasn't they able to prove, even in one court case, it's facts to show that? You know, so just the words that he's saying is stolen doesn't make it so. And how did they feel before 2016? Did they ever feel elections were not accurate in their results? I don't know that will help sway people who still staunch Trump. If anyone still believes that the election is stolen, I think they're too ingrained with Trump.
Well, you know, in addition to that, and I read this somewhere, so I didn't come up with this, but if the election was stolen and it was just generally so, then it also impacted Republicans who were,
Right, exactly.
you know, running for office. So,
Good points. Dwayne, you're back?
Yeah, I was wondering, have you heard anything from the Biden administration? You were active back there and you left because of the impossible situation you had. I'm wondering if you can look forward to contributing again to someplace in the administration back in Washington. And before I get off, let me just say this, that while you didn't win the election for the state senator, you made a lot of friends. So stay in there, hang in there. We like you.
yeah.
Good point.
Well, thank you very much. And don't worry, I won't give up. I don't give up. And, you know, yes, I was asked by several people to apply to the administration, and I have done so. I
Good.
don't know, you know, what's going to happen. And there's also, and I was sort of referring to this a little bit, there are organizations in DC that are mostly advocacy organizations relating to what I, you know, feel strongly about, although I was also in the Department of Justice. So that would be okay too, but our democracy issues and what we need to do to get us back in the country so that our voting rights and campaign finance and transparency and all the things that we all deserve, ethics, are preserved. But they're arguing that there should be someone either in the White House or someone who has an organization or office. And I think it should be both for the United States, working with states as well as federal agencies, and maybe even working, and there have been these in the past, but Trump administration stopped it, working with foreign governments as well on democracy issues and ways of strengthening democracies, because there's problems all over the world on this. Anyway, and many of them have suggested that I be appointed to run that. I would love to do that. So who knows? We don't know yet, but
Oh, good.
it'd be good.
We have a few more questions in our Q&A. I'm going to grab one of these. If Trump can pardon the January 6 participants, then they will know this. Might this hinder the investigation of what happened and who is responsible, just as the same foreknowledge hindered the Mueller investigation?
You know, for one thing, I think it's going to be, he can't pardon them in advance. He has to pardon them once they're convicted, because he's not going to pardon anybody who hasn't been found guilty of something. I mean, I don't see how, although I guess he tried to pardon already his family members who he knows that the U.S. attorney is investigating them. So, but I can't see how he could do that. But I think they're gonna go forward with the investigations on this. They're doing it apparently quite quickly. I think maybe Howie, I can't remember who was mentioning that, but I think they're moving on it really fast.
Thank you. Next question from the Q&A box. Despite many hopefuls, the Dems only won the Senate by the narrowest margin via Georgia Senate runoff. I'm just wondering if the Democratic Party is reviewing its focus, message, strategy to bring broader appeal to the voters.
Yeah, I think that the Democratic Party does have problems with messaging, always has to some degree. And also, you know, sort of being clear about what is going to be accomplished. I know, and you probably have all heard this, but when I was at the Department of Justice and appointed by Obama at the beginning of the administration, I noticed that what had happened before when it was a Republican administration was everybody was in lockstep. Everybody understood exactly what they had to do. And people said, yeah, that's true for the Republicans when they come in. And when the Democrats come in, they all get in a circle and shoot at each other. And I do think the Democratic Party has a long way to go in trying to work out better communications. I mean, especially look, in the campaigns, who did the best messaging? It was the Lincoln people, right? The Lincoln Project, and they are all Republicans.
Well, I think it was Will Rogers who said, I am not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that. We've got 2 questions left in our Q&A box, and we're getting long in the afternoon, so I'll try to get these to you quickly. What do you make of the recall petition of Gavin Newsom?
Well, let me say that you may know that I spoke up about the money that was given, and I wrote a complaint to the state AG as well as the Fair Political Practices Commission, because there was essentially what appeared to me to be illegal dark money, that $500,000 that came from an LLC to augment that recall. I think, I mean, I don't agree with the recall, frankly. But my doing that petition and request for, you know, filing a complaint had nothing to do with Gavin Newsom or the recall, the underlying basis for it. I just, you know, was against the illegality and campaign finance violation. However, I have been getting a lot of hate mail from people who are saying, you know, that, and I have one here somewhere that, you know, I'm somehow, you know, supporting Gavin Newsom on this. Well, you know, Gavin Newsom is in the midst of trying to figure out what to do about the pandemic. It's really complicated. I mean, this is something else that we're talking about. I mean, government is complicated and solutions to these things are complicated. We can dislike a lot of what he's done. I don't think he should be recalled. A large number of them who signed on because of his dinner at the French Laundry. And, you know, it's not good. It wasn't good. It was not smart, but it's not the end of the world either. I mean, it's what you look to is how are you governing the state? and what kinds of things that you're doing. And I worry about recalls, especially, it's going to cost a lot of money for the state to put on a recall election, a lot of money. And if that's true, that recall election will be not very long before when he would have been anyway up for reelection. And so it's kind of squandering of state resources to do it. So that's, and I will say that all those people, I mentioned the Los Gatos rally, they were also people who were saying that at the same time, besides all the Trump flags they had, they were also speaking about recalling Newsom. And I think it's just people are upset about being having to wear masks. None of them were wearing masks, etc. So that's what I think.
Thank you. We have one more question. Did anyone else have Sunday CBS Evening News and 60 Minutes overridden by Fox News last weekend? It was scary for me. It was recorded.
No,
That's
weird.
the last of our Q&A questions. Bob, I'm going to hand it back to you for some closing remarks.
And I have a local question. I know we're all interested here in the villages. You may or may not even have an answer for us, but we're all anxious to get the COVID vaccination. Do you have any idea when we're going to get it? We hear all kinds of rumors, and some people think it's going to be next week. Some people are saying what happened in May.
Well,
where are we at? Do you have any idea?
Let me just tell you that I just got a text from my son, who his wife works for the Covered California. She's one of their senior executives, and he was a Newsom appointee to the Health and Human Services Agency. And they have both been appointed to the task force. And he said to me, now anybody over 65 is supposed to be prioritized.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm a Kaiser member. I said, well, no one, Kaiser hasn't said anything to me about it.
Right.
And he said, call them. They are supposed to be giving it to you.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I don't know. You hear all kinds of rumors. Doctors have contacted me, I know, from PAMF, I'm part of PAMF, and say, stand by, but nothing's happening. And
yeah.
I assume we're probably going to have something here in the villages that's organized, from what I've heard from the health department.
Well, you should. And so, I think you should really, as my son suggested to me, pursue it and make sure that they do it, because the state, at least from the state perspective through the Newsom administration, is they're trying to make sure that everybody is going to push it out now, at least for those of us who are over 65.
Yeah.
65 and over.
It's very disappointing to hear like they have so many vaccinations and some of them aren't even being used, and a certain percentage of the healthcare workers aren't taking them. Like, unbelievable. It's really surprising.
I know. I heard that in New York in particular, they had a lot of vaccines to go to the healthcare workers, and many of them wouldn't take it. And so they just sat there, and because they need to be utilized within, especially the ones that need to be refrigerated within a certain period of time, they're going to go to waste. It's crazy.
One other question I had, Ann, because we haven't really talked about, I think it's important. My perception, and I know I've heard this from a lot of people, that if these were black marchers going after the Capitol, they would have been shot. There wouldn't have been any of this taking photos with them and letting people go and so forth. So I just kind of wanted to get your reflections on the injustice of that, or the disparity between, we see how folks that are white get treated and folks that are black get treated.
Right. Well, I think that the photograph that has been sent around and shown where there was the Black Lives Matter in DC, which was pretty much, as I understand it, very peaceful. And there's the picture at the Capitol with Ed, and I think at the Lincoln Memorial, you know, with those officers in full regalia,
Yeah.
hundreds of them.
Mhm.
And, you know, we know, and as these investigations are going to continue, everyone knew that there was going to be some problem. I mean, it was, and they knew it in the White House. They knew it, the Capitol Police. So the fact that many of them ushered people in is really a concern. And I do think that there is definitely an element of racial disparity in this. And that is another reckoning that we're going to have in this country, really, because it's also causing a lot of the divisions. And I know, you know, a lot of these issues, and people ask me this, and when I was speaking before, I mean, a lot of these issues really do have a racial component to them. For example, I know, because of the work I've done in the 2016 election, and this is not about the, you know, the police response, but most of the differential in vote in swing states was because Blacks by 8% voted less than they had previously, and it made the difference.
Right.
And the reason that they did that was because a lot of the Russian disinformation that they got saying, oh, don't, and it still exists. It's going on still on the internet, you know, oh, we're a Black group, don't vote. You know, Hillary Clinton they're all evil, don't go out to vote, kind of thing. And so there's clearly a desire, and you could see it. I mean, that's who made the difference in Georgia. It was the Black votes, you know. There's clearly a desire to keep the Black, not only their votes, but just keep them subjugated.
Diane, over to you. Do we have more questions? I see there's more faces here.
Oh, he's got his hand up.
And we have Janet. Janet Truman has joined us.
I've been listening. I wasn't on video. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic to hear. And thank you for being you. I just wanted to, sir, just to acknowledge that just now I was watching the House all morning, and well, since noon my time, and Nancy Pelosi just finished signing the Declaration of Impeachment formally in front of the House Representatives.
Right.
And so it goes. And it was surprising to see the amount of the servicemen sleeping on the floor in the rotunda, and then also, you know, guarding and being in our Capitol. It's been a very emotional roller coaster ride from a long time, not just this past week.
I think, Janet, the last time we saw that in the Capitol, I could be wrong, and maybe Yank could correct me, but I would guess it was Union soldiers in the Civil War sleeping in the Capitol.
That's true.
To save the Union. I remember hearing, you know, reading about that.
I like the way they bring past history to the present, and I'm hoping that our schools and our colleges and our universities will bring all this information to the fore in a way that our children and even our young adult children can understand, comprehend, and really siphon out what's ridiculous, what's valid, and what can be and should be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Anne, there's a thank you to you in the Q&A box. Anne, thank you for answering our questions. It's always great to hear your perspectives. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for really, really good questions. And anytime, as
Good.
was mentioned right at the beginning, I think Bob and Tony, I am always happy to come and talk to people at the villages because you're so interesting and so interested. I mean, you spent all morning, Janet, watching her, watching the hearings. I mean, I just think it's great to be able to talk to people who are so attuned to the issues.
Dan, I see your picture down there. Did you have something you wanted to say? You're muted.
Muted, love.
And you muted.
Yeah, okay. I think it's too late now.
The horses left the barn already?
Yeah, well, I mean, what my question was, if Anne's willing to ask
Sure.
it unfortunately appears that some Congress people were involved in letting people in, showing them around. I guess one guy had a gun even on him. And can the Justice Department and the FBI investigate them just like they investigate you or me?
Yes, they can.
Hope they do.
Absolutely. Yes, they can. And I think that there hopefully will be repercussions. I mean,
Okay.
you know, unless people are held accountable, we're in trouble. We're in continued trouble.
Right. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a couple more thank yous in the Q&A box. Thank you, Anne.
Well,
and then
thank
one,
you. So,
and
Oh,
one from
sorry.
Jane Carnoy, who is the chairperson of our senior academy. Says, thank you so much. Loved it all.
Very good.
you know, that's funny that you say that you loved it because I usually, before I start speaking, I'll say, this isn't going to be fun. So I'm glad you did. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me again. I really,
This has been great. I actually think in this new format that Tony tried today, the audience can tell us, but I think it worked especially well. Just taking questions on the spot, particularly given the fast moving news stories we've been hearing. So I add my thanks to you and to our lively audience today. I think this is probably the most participation we've had, Tony, in a long, long time. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Any last comments, Tony?
yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that had the courage to put their electronic hand up and come and join us on stage. Hopefully it wasn't too painful, that transition.
No, I don't
We enjoyed having you.
It was great.
We enjoyed having Anne too. Maybe Anne, you've got a couple of minutes. You can stay with us as everybody now wends their way on that long drive home.
I want to wish Ann good success in her
Yes.
ability to pick up an important position in the Biden administration.
You have our backing. If you need
No.
anything, just let us know.
We'll be watching.
if any of you know Biden,